What's going on, guys? My name is Curci, and I want to talk about Marvel because it's been a minute. Specifically Marvel Phase 4, because we had announced Marvel Phase 4, we have all these projects coming up in the future, and we've already embarked on it. So I'm going to talk about the movies that we know about. I might speculate on some things that they could potentially announce in the future. There's a lot of speculating going on when I'm talking about a lot of this stuff. I'm going to try my best to keep this video pretty condensed, so I might fly through a couple of the topics. This is actually the third or fourth time I've tried doing this video, but since we've already embarked on Phase 4 with WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki is just around the corner. I'm going to go ahead and give a spoiler warning for all things Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I'm going to do my best to speculate on some of the projects that we have upcoming just to see if I'm going to be right. Going to make a video, going to put it out on the internet, so now it's there, so if I'm right, I'm right. If I'm wrong, then people can call me out. But spoiler warning for everything Marvel related that has happened, so WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, all the movies that have already come out. Just know we're going to be talking about spoilers and potential spoilers. Also, before we get started, I would like to remind everybody to please give this video a like. It helps out tremendously. Also, consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified of all new video uploads. Now let's talk about Marvel. Let's kick things off with WandaVision first. Now, WandaVision was the first show that came out in Phase 4. It wasn't originally supposed to be the first thing because the COVID pandemic kind of messed things up, but it was the first thing that we got. So WandaVision is a play on the comic series House of M, where Wanda creates an alternate reality in that mutants are the ruling power of the world. We don't have mutants yet in the MCU, and so this story is more about Wanda dealing with the grief of losing Vision, losing the love of her life. Keep in mind, Vision was not blipped away by Thanos, he was literally killed by Thanos. So when the blip got reversed, Vision never came back, and so Wanda had to come to terms with that, and she doesn't deal with it well, so she goes to this town of Westview, she envelops the entire city in this alternate reality known as the Hex, and they're all living out this sitcom world that Wanda has created, and in so she's able to create a Vision and then have the happy life that she's always wanted at the cost of technically imprisoned all of these people to play along in her perfect world. But it's really a show about grief, accepting it and moving on from it. Now in the show, we see the introduction of characters like Monica Rambeau, even though we've seen her technically before in Captain Marvel when she was a kid, but we see her fully introduced. Now within the Hex, Wanda has created a Vision, like we said, but she's also created two children who later become known as Wiccan and Speed. And so Monica's in there and she's trying to convince Wanda that she's not doing the right thing, that she's imprisoning all these people, she's causing them pain, and she needs to lower the Hex. But by doing that, she would have to sacrifice Vision and she would have to sacrifice her children, and she's not so keen on doing that. Meanwhile, you got the villain Agatha Harkness. After the Hex was created, Agatha was like, what's this over here? And she was like, ooh, I want your power. And so that gives the show the villain. But what's interesting is that by the end of the show, we don't see Agatha get killed. Instead, Agatha hints that Wanda is going to need Agatha at some point, so Wanda doesn't kill Agatha. She kind of puts her in the role that Agatha chose, because originally in the show she was the nosy neighbor. So now if Wanda ever does need Agatha, because in the comics Agatha does serve as a mentor to Wanda, Wanda now knows, oh, I can always go back to Westview, find Agatha, and then have her teach me the things, because if something's going to be coming down the line, I'm gonna need that help. Also introduced in the show was White Vision. Now White Vision is original Vision, kind of. It's the body of Vision rebuilt, but without the personality of the Vision that we know. I think that going forward, we're going to see White Vision be Vision, but he's not going to have that emotional connection to Wanda. It's Vision, just not the same Vision. Now at the end of the show, after defeating Agatha, Wanda does lower the Hex, which means that she sacrifices her children and Vision, and then she goes off in isolation. But what's interesting is that in the mid-credit scene, we see Wanda flipping through the pages of a book known as The Darkhold, which was originally in the possession of Agatha Harkness, but is now in the possession of Wanda. And that's a book that is no bueno. It is a book of evil. It is known as the Book of the Damned. And if Wanda is flipping through the book, seemingly trying to find a way to bring her children back into reality, I feel like Wanda is about to mess with something that either she doesn't fully understand. We learn in the show that the Scarlet Witch is sort of like this prophesized witch, but she wields something that is known as chaos magic. And chaos magic is something that is very heavily associated with this godlike figure in the Marvel comics, which is known as either Chthon or Chthon. I don't really know how to pronounce the name. I'm gonna go with Chthon because it sounds like Cthulhu, but it is this chaos god, and who knows if maybe that's something that Wanda is going to bump elbows with. If maybe she's flipping through the books to A, understand her powers better, which brings her in contact with this chaos god, or she's trying to find a way to bring back her children, because in the mid-credit scene we hear the voices of her children, and so it's possible that Wanda might be trying to find a way to bring her children into reality. And by doing that, does that not mess with things in the long term. Because one of the things that we do know about WandaVision is that it is the beginning of an arc, a 3-part arc that concludes with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now, we know for sure that Elizabeth Olsen will be returning as Scarlet Witch in Doctor Strange 2, but really the question is, what is the Multiverse of Madness? Is it just, here's all these multiverses that have just gone crazy and now Doctor Strange has to go and they have to fix it? Some universes are bleeding into other universes. What has been the cause of that? And one can theorize that perhaps Wanda is the cause of that, either by coming in contact with this chaos god to better understand her powers, or she's gone into some sort of multiverse to bring her children back. But also from the comics, Wanda does get her children, but her children are actually fragments of the soul of Mephisto, who is the devil of the Marvel comics. So it could be that Wanda discovers a way to bring back her children, she steals those souls from Mephisto, then that pisses off Mephisto, and that causes the Multiverse of Madness. But there are other entities that can come into play that can cause a madness within the multiverse, and one of them being Dormammu. Dormammu is this sort of dimensional being that we saw introduced in the first Doctor Strange, and the only way that Doctor Strange was able to defeat Dormammu was that he had the Time Stone. With the Time Stone, Doctor Strange was able to trap Dormammu into a time loop, which forced Dormammu to make a deal with Doctor Strange to leave Earth alone. After the events of Infinity War and Endgame, the Time Stone no longer exists. Thanos destroyed all of the Infinity Stones, so the chief weapon that Doctor Strange and the Sorcerers had against the forces of darkness no longer there. Does Dormammu know about that, and will he take advantage of it? And if he takes advantage of it, will that cause madness within the multiverse? But there are other elements that we also have to consider, namely Mordo. Chiwetel Ejiofor is going to be returning as Baron Mordo, and what's interesting is that at the end of the original Doctor Strange, we know that Mordo is disillusioned with the Sorcerers and the fact that there are too many of them. So it could be that he looks at Wanda and he's like, do you see what she's doing? She's caused this multiverse of madness. This is my point. What's also important to keep in mind is that Doctor Strange is the end of the 3-part arc, but there is a middle, and that middle is Spider-Man No Way Home. If you look at the rumors that have been coming out for Spider-Man 3, you wouldn't be that surprised that it actually is the middle part of this 3-part story. Spider-Man No Way Home is actually going to be a little bit more Spider-Verse-y. It's going to lean into other Spider-Man franchises and pull elements from it. For example, 2 things that are confirmed is Jamie Foxx as Electro and Alfred Molina returning as Doc Ock. 2 characters from 2 different franchises, one from the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, one from the Tobey Maguire franchise. Now you could just sit here and say, okay, that's as far as they're gonna go. You got Tom Holland, the MCU Spider-Man, facing off against a villain from the Amazing Spider-Man and a villain from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. And when you consider this idea of the title No Way Home, that maybe Spider-Man falls into a different universe where all of these other characters have also fallen into. And so it doesn't really take place in the MCU, but it's in this separate universe, and Spider-Man is trying to get back to his own universe. But there are other rumors surrounding this movie, namely that Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire are even going to return to reprise their role as Peter Parker. So you would have Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, and also rumored are Willem Dafoe to return as the Green Goblin. You have Thomas Hayden Church to return as Sandman. And if you consider other characters that are in this universe, you can make the argument that maybe they're building up a Sinister Six. But then it retreads one too many steps with the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse animated film. So I think it's more possible that maybe that's not going to happen. And also Andrew Garfield said that he is not in Spider-Man No Way Home. Could be him being like, I don't want to spoil the surprise, so I'm going to tell you that I'm not in it, even though I am in it. But at the same time, if you look at the IMDb page, Thomas Hayden Church, Willem Dafoe, Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, they are not in this movie at all. But if you do decide to bring in additional Spider-Man into this universe, then that sort of leaves the door open for Spider-Man to turn around and go, oh, by the way, you remember that time when my identity got revealed? Well, it turns out that there are different Spider-Man bouncing around, and that Spider-Man wasn't actually me, so it's not me. You can't put that back in the box, though, because people are always going to remember, hey, aren't you the person that the guy from the Daily Bugle blamed for being Spider-Man? Like, people are always going to associate Peter Parker with Spider-Man. I don't really know if there's a way that you can put that back in the box. Unless they decide that this is a way that they can take the Tom Holland Spider-Man and fold him into the Sony universe. Because if there's a craziness going on with the multiverse and you have Spider-Man who is falling through to different universes and there really is no way home, maybe he falls from the MCU universe, he ends up in the Sony universe, and that's where he's going to end up being. So it could be that at the end of this movie, we don't really have an MCU Spider-Man anymore, that he's just in this other universe now. Now, what is interesting is that when Marvel made the deal with Sony to have Tom Holland continue to be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he was going to be doing one additional Spider-Man movie, but he was also going to appear in a team-up movie. Some might be able to guess that would be Doctor Strange 2, 2, because these stories are all connected, so it makes sense that he would appear in Doctor Strange 2, or he could appear in whatever the next Avengers movie is going to be. After that, he would retire or be folded into the Sony universe. Who knows? We need to get used to this idea that there is an end to Spider-Man in the MCU. But let's start to segue into some other properties here. Earlier, we were talking about Monica Rambeau, so why don't we start talking about some Captain Marvel stuff? But before we go directly into Captain Marvel, why don't we talk about Miss Marvel? Now, Miss Marvel is a character that is an Inhuman, which is interesting with the MCU because there aren't any MCU Inhumans, unless you count the Inhuman show and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., in which there are definitely Inhumans, but I still think that those aren't canon anymore. So there are no Inhumans, and Inhumans is kind of a trigger word for the Marvel Cinematic Universe because we almost got an Inhumans movie. Back when they were announcing the movies for Phase 3, there was an Inhumans movie slated. But if you look at some of the behind the scenes stuff, to give you the nutshell version, they were trying to push Inhumans to be the replacement for the mutants and the X-Men, which Marvel at the time did not have. But really, it didn't fit into the Infinity Saga that Kevin Feige was trying to create. But it was just something that some of the higher ups at Marvel were trying to push into the MCU. But Kevin Feige pushed back on it. They ended up not making that a movie and ended up becoming a TV show that was straight garbage. But at the same time, it makes you wonder, are they ever going to introduce Inhumans? And if they do, is this Miss Marvel show going to be the first time that we actually fully address the fact that there are Inhumans? Now, you can always turn around and say, A, she's a mutant, which I don't think that they're going to do anything mutants for the next couple years, or she's just some enhanced person. She can stretch her arm, she can embiggen herself, she has powers, and the reason why she has powers is because reasons. But Miss Marvel is a kid known as Kamala Khan, who is also a big fan of Captain Marvel, of Carol Danvers, which is why when she gains her powers and becomes a superhero, she calls herself Miss Marvel, sort of as an homage to her hero. I think that she will be the first of a new wave of heroes that we will later talk about, but also we know that this is going to lean directly into Captain Marvel 2, which is not called Captain Marvel 2 anymore. It is just called The Marvels. So when I originally did this video, I was talking about Captain Marvel 2 as Captain Marvel 2, as a sequel to Captain Marvel, but now they've rebranded it as The Marvels, and now I'm like, this kind of changes the way I think about this movie, because it's not so much a Carol Danvers movie, it is now a Carol Danvers and Kamala Khan movie. And we know that Monica Rambeau is also going to be included in that. She also has her powers. She gained her powers in WandaVision. She kept passing through the barrier of the Hex so many times that she got introduced to this cosmic radiation, and it ended up giving her powers. And so you have this team up of Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, and Monica Rambeau, and they are going to be fighting against some sort of threat. But what's interesting is the dynamic of these three characters, because while you have Captain Marvel, you also have Kamala Khan, who is a big fan of Captain Marvel, but then you also have Monica Rambeau, who also at one point idolized Captain Marvel in the Captain Marvel movie. But we've been hinting at, with the WandaVision series, that maybe Monica Rambeau does not think so fondly on Captain Marvel anymore. So it'll create this interesting dynamic between the three characters. You have the hero, you have the fan of the hero, and the former fan of the hero. And how does the fan of the hero and the former fan of the hero interact? Now, it could be that Monica either blames Captain Marvel for her mother dying, because we learned in WandaVision that Maria Rambeau, she died of cancer, and unfortunately she died of cancer during the 5 years of the blip, in that Monica Rambeau was blipped away and could not be there for her mother. So either Monica blames Captain Marvel for A, not saving her mother, maybe she thinks that Captain Marvel has the means of getting rid of cancer, maybe being close proximity to Captain Marvel caused the cancer, or she was just like, why weren't you there for my mother? Either way, an interesting dynamic between those three characters. I am very interested in that aspect of the movie alone. What I don't know is what this movie is going to be centered around in terms of its story. What is the threat? What is the villain? We know that the original Captain Marvel took place in the 90s, and she was mainly combating against the Skrulls, even though we learned that the Skrulls were actually good guys, and the Kree Empire. And we didn't see Captain Marvel again until the events of Avengers Endgame, which took place in the 2020s, which is where we are right now. So what was Captain Marvel doing in between the events of the first Captain Marvel and now the sequel, which is just The Marvels? Did she ever cross paths with the Kree Empire ever again? Because we know that Yon-Rogg and the Supreme Intelligence were not taken care of in the first Captain Marvel movie. Are we going to feature more of the Skrulls? Because we know that the Secret Invasion series is coming. Is there an evil faction of the Skrulls waiting out there in the universe? Did Talos and his people flee an evil empire? Did they know that that was always out there? And so that's why S.W.O.R.D. got created, because Talos was sitting down with Nick Fury and he was like, listen, man, there are other Skrulls out there and they are bad news and we need to be ready for that. So you might want to come up with some sort of defense organization to combat against that when that threat does come. Whatever threat that they do face, maybe that leads a little bit directly into Secret Invasion, in that we do have the evil Skrulls coming in and starting to take over Earth leadership or Earth heroes. I mean, that's what Secret Invasion is that you have Skrulls, which are shape-shifting beings coming in, taking over governments by pretending to be the government leaders. I think this is going to be one of the more interesting shows that are in the lineup because, one, I'm wondering if we are going to see any Avengers character or any big heroes being introduced. Like, yeah, okay, if the Marvels does slowly lead into Secret Invasion, are we going to see Captain Marvel? Are we going to see Miss Marvel, Monica Rambeau? I'm really fascinated with how this show is going to play out. You don't know who to trust. You don't know if you can trust this person, if the person that you were trusting is a Skrull. It's going to be a lot of like, crap, you're my best friend, but I don't know if I can trust you. As a villain, it could be that it is the Skrull Empress, that perhaps she was the ruler of the Skrulls. They became super evil. Then Talos left, warned Earth, and now she's here. And this is what Talos was warning Earth against. Are we going to get perhaps an introduction of Super Skrull? Because what we learned in the comics is that the Skrulls have the choice of either you can physically shapeshift your appearance or you can shapeshift and gain the abilities of another. That is what Super Skrull is, who is most linked to the Fantastic Four, because if you ever look up Super Skrull, it most likely has that character with the powers of the Fantastic Four, which makes me wonder, is Secret Invasion going to lead into the Fantastic Four? Are we going to see the origins of the Fantastic Four perhaps in a post-credit scene with Secret Invasion? The reason why I bring this up is because if you look at the origins of the Fantastic Four, you know that they did like this space expedition, they got introduced to like this cosmic energy which gave them powers, which is not unlike the way that Monica gains her powers in WandaVision. See, in WandaVision, they were very specific into the kind of energy that was creating the Hex, and they did refer to it as cosmic radiation dating all the way back to the Big Bang. So it's possible that Monica receiving her powers got it the exact same way that a future Fantastic Four will get their powers. So maybe the Fantastic Four are actually sword agents, and during the events, or even after the events in a post-credit scene of Secret Invasion, they go off, they get exposed to the same cosmic radiation that Monica got exposed to, but just more in a natural sense, and then that creates the Fantastic Four. If we're going to have Secret Invasion lead into the Fantastic Four, maybe we do Super Skrull. Though I do think that the first Fantastic Four movie should be by the numbers. We should introduce Dr. Doom as the villain in the same way that we introduced Loki in the original Thor as the villain, and then Loki became a reoccurring character later. We should do the exact same thing with Doom. Doom has the caliber of being an Avengers level threat, but also being a reoccurring character that can at times join forces with the good guys to combat against a greater evil. So I am very excited for the Fantastic Four, but more so because we're going to be getting Doom. Now, we do know the Fantastic Four is going to be on the latter part of Phase 4. We don't have to go over their origin because we already did it in another show, so now we could just get right to it. Now, speaking of Dr. Doom is the leader of a country known as Latveria, which is an Eastern European country, not unlike Sokovia. Now, what we learned in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is that Sokovia really messed up after the events of Age of Ultron, and it got taken over by its neighbors. Maybe Latveria was a neighboring country to Sokovia, got taken over by Dr. Doom, by Victor Von Doom. So we spend more time really molding our villain, especially a villain that we are going to be wanting to go back to. I mean, still use your heroes. I mean, the movie is called The Fantastic Four, so use your heroes to defeat the villain, and so it's their movie, but we're putting just a little bit more effort in building up our villain that we're going to be using later. But since I brought up Falcon and the Winter Soldier, why don't we talk about Falcon and the Winter Soldier? See, after the blip, half of everybody was gone. And so what countries realized was that a lot of their infrastructure was running at half capacity, so they allowed immigrants to come over for free, fill in those gaps so that their countries can stay moving. But when the blip got unblipped, all of a sudden some of these countries were like, oh, by the way, all those immigrants that we welcomed in, we're now going to kick you out. So that pissed off a lot of those immigrants who later radicalized and became the Flag Smashers led by Carly Morgenthau, and you have Falcon and the Winter Soldier uniting to take them out. And they also used Baron Zemo, after breaking him out of prison, to get a leg up on how the Flag Smashers are operating. So we do see the dynamic between him and our heroes and having to work together, even though that they were once enemies. But one of the more important aspects of this show is Captain America. Because in Endgame, Steve Rogers gave the shield to Sam as sort of to say, I want you to take on the mantle. Sam accepts the shield, but then later thinks that he's not worthy of it, so he gives it to a museum to put it on display, but then the government takes it and they're like, no, we're going to brand our own Captain America. They give it to John Walker. He becomes Captain America, and you start to see throughout the show that he's sort of collapsing under the pressure of being Captain America, that he's not worthy of it. Steve did not choose him. Sometimes he doesn't make the right call. He doesn't have the greatest moral compass. He's just not Captain America. Now, one of the things about the Flag Smashers is that they have super soldier serum, so they are super soldiers, but there are some super soldier vials that are just out there where John Walker gets one of those vials, and what we learned from the original Captain America is that when you get the super soldier serum, you amplify whatever is inside of you. Good becomes great, bad becomes worse. So when John Walker gets the serum, things don't exactly go the way he was probably hoping that they would go. So that causes Sam and Bucky to come at odds with John Walker. They take the shield. That leads into Sam embracing his role as Captain America, who looks fantastic as Captain America, by the way. They unite, they take out the Flag Smashers, and that's the way that the show ends. We end with a brand new Captain America, but we also have John Walker still bouncing around, and he's been rebranded into U.S. Agent by Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, who is Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. Now, in the comics, that character is referred to as Madam Hydra at one point. I don't know if they're going to lean into that. Hydra, I think, still exists as some sort of entity in some regard. The last time we heard from them was in Ant-Man, which was after the events of Age of Ultron, because you can sit there and watch Age of Ultron and be like, this is the end of Hydra, but in reality, cut off one head, two more will take its place. So it's possible that there is an entity of Hydra just operating in the background, and maybe this character that Julia Louis-Dreyfus is playing is actually just a representative of Hydra. Still, I don't think that they're going to lean into that. I think that her character is going to be more of a Nick Fury character that is going to be uniting her own Avengers team with US Agent and possibly even Zemo. Because in the wrapping up scenes in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we do hear Val refer to Zemo as a friend. Zemo, by the way, was recaptured, thrown into the raft. But interestingly enough, Zemo did lead a team known as the Thunderbolts. Basically, in the comics, the Avengers were taken out of commission. There were no heroes. So the Thunderbolts came in, this sort of team of new heroes led by Zemo. But then we learned that they're actually villains. The Avengers come back and those two teams fight. Now, in the MCU, while we did see the Avengers fight each other, we never saw an evil Avengers and a good Avengers fight each other. So it could be that Falcon and the Winter Soldier is the first step into building a roster that they are going to later introduce. Because look at the current state of the MCU. Iron Man is dead. Captain America is presumed dead. Vision is dead. Unfortunately, with the passing of Chadwick Boseman, we don't know what is going on with the Black Panther character. Thor's off-world. The Guardians of the Galaxy are off-world. We don't know where Captain Marvel is at this time. Hawkeye is trying to retire, which we'll talk about in a minute. Black Widow is dead. We don't know about the state of the Hulk. The Avengers facility was destroyed in Endgame, so we don't know about the current state of the Avengers right now. Maybe the world also sees it the same way, so maybe Val is seeing this as an opportunity to create her own team that will have as much influence as the Avengers have, only to learn that they're actually villainous, and then the actual Avengers reunite, they fight against them. So I think that in the future, with some of these other projects that we're going to get, we're going to lean more into this idea of creating a sort of rogues gallery of characters that we're going to later pull into the Thunderbolts. Now, before we get too far away from this idea of Captain America, let's talk about Captain America 4, which has been announced, starring Anthony Mackie as Captain America. While Sam Wilson is going to be continuing as Captain America, the mantle of Falcon has already been passed on, because in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, after the fight with John Walker in which they took the shield from him, Falcon's wings were damaged. He gave that unit to Joaquin Torres, who does in the comics later become the Falcon, all while the Falcon was being Captain America. So it makes sense that maybe in Captain America 4, we see Joaquin Torres taking on the role of the Falcon. So we can see the next Falcon being introduced in the next Captain America movie. Now, it does beg the question of who is going to be the villain. I did a little bit of a search and I found out that one of the biggest villains that the Falcon Captain America faced was the Hydra Captain America. Basically, in the comics, they got the Cosmic Cube, which in the MCU is the Tesseract, which is not what the Cosmic Cube is. Someone rewrote the history of Steve Rogers, making him a loyalist to Hydra, so that when he became Captain America, he was truly loyal to Hydra. And so this was a threat that Sam Wilson's Captain America had to fight against. So is it possible that we would bring Chris Evans back to be a truly evil Hydra Captain America? Which could be as easy as go into the multiverse, grab a Hydra Captain America, and now we have them fight. Which would be interesting because you have Sam Wilson being Captain America, taking on this role that he once idolized, but then he sees the man that he idolized is now the villain, and so you have a lot of this internal conflict with Sam. I think that would be a really interesting story. Do I think they're going to go that way? Maybe not. What's more interesting is this idea identity of Sharon Carter being the power broker. Now, in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we learn that Sharon Carter, she either is the power broker or she is very associated with the power broker. What's interesting is that in the scene where we are getting the confirmation that she is the power broker, they don't actually call her the power broker. Only one character calls her the power broker, and he comes in like mid-conversation, and she doesn't confirm or deny it. She never refers to herself as the power broker. Carly actually never calls her the power broker. Sometimes the simplest answer is actually the correct one. If I were a betting man, that Sharon Carter is the power broker, but I think it's left vague enough that the MCU could turn around and be like, no, she's not actually the power broker. She's just a high-ranking member of the power broker's inner circle. But if she is the power broker, in the post-credit scene for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we see that she has been brought back into the fold as far as the US government, because after the events of Captain America Civil War, she kind of became a criminal, she became a fugitive, but then after the events of Infinity War and Endgame, all of the Avengers received a pardon. She did not. So she had to continue to stay on the run. She could not come back to America because then she would just be arrested. So finally, after the events of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, she does get that pardon. She gets reinstated, but by doing that, she gains access to a lot of government secrets. And if she is the power broker, what are those secrets going to result in? Are they going to end up in the wrong hands? So basically, are we setting up Sharon Carter as a villain for the next Captain America movie, which again creates a lot of internal conflict for Sam because he is friends with Sharon, a friend of the hero who becomes the villain. Now, in the MCU, there are all of these little things that fall into the wrong hands, whether if it's information that the power broker gains, gives it to the wrong people, or if it's Stark Tech, because let's talk about Armor Wars. Rhodey is going to get his own series as War Machine or Iron Patriot, whatever they decide to call him, but it is all going to be about Stark Tech falling into the wrong hands, which is not at all a new thing for the MCU. Now, the question is, who is behind or who is getting this Stark Tech? Is it Justin Hammer? Are we going to see that character returning? Is it Sharon Carter? Did Sharon Carter somehow finagle Stark Tech and is stealing it under the table to these other entities? I don't know a ton of how Armor Wars is going to play out. Most likely you're going to have Rhodey fighting against a bunch of evil Iron Men, but I do think that for sure this show is going to lead into the show Ironheart. Now, Ironheart stars the character known as Riri Williams, who does end up creating her own Iron Man suit and ends up becoming known as the character Ironheart. Now, it's possible that she was probably already building this, but didn't have the right pieces to kind of finish it. But then after the events of Armor Wars, she was able to gain certain pieces because Stark Tech is just all over the place now. And then we see her own series. But what's interesting is, are we going to see Rhodey in that show? Is he going to act as sort of like a mentor? Does she even idolize Tony Stark? I mean, I think it's one thing to idolize Iron Man and not idolize Tony Stark. Okay, yes, I believe that there should be an Iron Man. I don't think that Tony Stark should be that Iron Man, even though Tony Stark is like the greatest hero that this universe has ever seen because he's defeated Thanos. I don't know a ton about Ironheart, but it'll be interesting to see her interaction with Rhodey and seeing what her Iron Man suit's gonna look like, the threats that she's gonna face. Really, by this point, I'm starting to realize that we're introducing so many of these younger characters, maybe we're building towards something. Speaking of a character that is also going to be introduced, let's talk about She-Hulk. Jennifer Susan Walters is a lawyer. She gets into this accident. She needs a blood transfusion, and the only person that matches her blood type is her cousin. Spoiler alert, is the Hulk. Bruce Banner himself, but of course he has very Hulkified blood. So when he donates his blood to her, she becomes super Hulkified. She becomes the She-Hulk, which is actually, if you think about it, not unlike the current version of the Hulk that we have, where they're just perpetually green, big, strong, but they have that intelligence. Because unlike classic Hulk, She-Hulk does not shift from normal person into a Hulk. Very similar to what the current Hulk is. Now, one of the things that I find very interesting about She-Hulk is that I think this show is going to present an opportunity to tell a true Hulk story. Marvel and Disney do not have full control over the Hulk. The reason why they've never made a sequel to The Incredible Hulk is because Universal doesn't really want to play ball with Marvel, so Marvel has to tell Hulk stories within other properties. We can't tell true Hulk stories. Hulk is always a secondary character in another character's movie, so while we are leaning more into World War Hulk within Ragnarok, it's still the story of Ragnarok, and we always have to come back to that with Thor. But I think with She-Hulk, it gives an opportunity to tell a true Hulk story. Maybe we can bring Abomination in, which, by the way, Abomination will be returning for the first time since we've seen him in The Incredible Hulk. Now, whether he is going to be serving as the villain or if he's going to be more of the Zemo role where he's helping them combat against the real villain, but I think this presents an opportunity to bring in characters that you were teasing in The Incredible Hulk, namely the leader. She-Hulk provides that gray area where, yes, it is She-Hulk, she is the star, but really we can can tell a true Hulk story with this. So I think that this presents a lot of opportunity to do that. Now, before we talk about Hawkeye, which is going to be the next thing that I want to lean into, because I'm going to talk about what I think Marvel is now building up toward. But first, I want to talk about Black Widow. Now, Black Widow has gone through some crap. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, Black Widow, which was originally supposed to have come out in the summer last year, kept getting delayed again. Finally, we're going to be getting it in July as it releases simultaneously in theaters and on Disney+. And of course, if you've ever seen Endgame, you know how Black Widow's story ends. This movie actually takes place in between the events of Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War. But it's going a lot more into the backstory of Black Widow, what she went through to become the Black Widow, and more so that while she is the Black Widow, she is not the only one. We're also going to be seeing introduction of a lot of different characters, such as Red Guardian being played by David Harbour. Now, the Red Guardian is the Russian version of Captain America, or at least their attempt at it. Yelena Belova, who's being played by Florence Pugh. Melina Vostokov, who's being played by Rachel Weisz. I think I'm saying her last name right. I don't know. And also the villain Taskmaster. Now, if you've seen the trailers, you know that Red Guardian, Yelena, Black Widow, and Melina are all sort of this four-person family. Of course, I don't think that they have any direct relation with each other, but you got this little family dynamic. But then you also have Taskmaster, who is the villain. And Taskmaster is a character that has photographic memory and can copy any fighting style of someone else. And we see that displayed in the trailer. I think that the organization or whatever entity is creating Black Widows, the same one that created Yelena, the same one that created Natasha, are now creating new Black Widows. But if you look at IMDb, there is no actor or actress listed as Taskmaster, which tells me that their identity is important. Makes me think possibly going to be Melina. It could also be Yelena, but Yelena is set to appear as a regular in the Hawkeye series, and I don't think you would do that if she was Taskmaster. I guess you could. You could do like a bait and switch and be like, not a villain, actually a good guy. Still, Yelena is set to appear as a regular in the Hawkeye series. I still think that Taskmaster is the villain. I think Melina is going to be the villain, and then you have Red Guardian, who is either going to die in the movie or is going to be some sort of other character that we see later down the line. But we brought up Hawkeye, so let's talk about Hawkeye. I think that Hawkeye himself is a very compelling character in the sense that, yeah, he fought with the Avengers, but then after phase 2, he kept trying to retire. He got brought into the fold with Civil War. He got brought into the fold with Endgame to help undo the snap, but then he loses his best friend Natasha. And I think that this show is going to cover a lot of that grief while also trying to give up his role as Hawkeye. And I think that having Yelena in this show really works because we see the dynamic of, yeah, he's trying to grieve his best friend, but his best friend's sister is also there, possibly also grieving. It'd be interesting to see the dynamic between those two characters, but also interesting is the introduction of the character Kate Bishop. Maybe Kate Bishop is already involved in the plot of the movie, and so in order to help with her defending herself, he teaches her how to use the bow, and then she ends up becoming the next Hawkeye, which allows for Clint Barton to just say, all right, I'm fully done. There's a new Hawkeye. I don't have to be Hawkeye anymore. But once again, we're introducing a younger character into this role of a hero, and so let's talk about that. Let's talk about Young Avengers. We have Miss Marvel, we have Ironheart, Kate Bishop, She-Hulk, Wiccan, Speed. Miles Morales was already hinted at in Spider-Man Homecoming, which again, with it being a Sony property, you kind of have to remove that because you never really know if they're going to renew the deal and bring Miles Morales into Young Avengers or not. Eli Bradley, who later becomes the Patriot, was in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So you have all these characters that are younger characters. It could be that they are setting up a Young Avengers team, but also they could just replace the word young with new. And so you have a new Captain America, you have a new Hawkeye. In the Thor movie, we're going to be bringing in a brand new Thor. We don't know what's going on with the Black Panther character, if there's going to be a new Black Panther, but if there's a new Black Panther, then there's a new Black Panther. You also have a new Hulk. There's a lot of new going around, so it could be that, yeah, okay, we're building up to Young Avengers, but we're not going to call it Young Avengers, we're going to call it New Avengers because it is the new cast of characters, and so this is the Avengers going forward. But I brought up Thor, so let's talk about Thor Love and Thunder. So as of right now, Thor is off with the Guardians of the Galaxy. He is left Earth, he has given the throne of Asgard to Valkyrie, but if Thor is with the Guardians of the Galaxy, are the Guardians of the Galaxy going to be in Thor 4? The answer is yes. Kraglin, Nebula, and Star-Lord are all set to appear in Thor 4. And of course, like I said, we're going to be adapting the story of Lady Thor with Natalie Portman. Now, in the comics, Shane Foster is dying of cancer, and then she gains the powers of Thor, and then she just becomes Lady Thor. But the question is, will she continue to be Lady Thor going forward, or is she just going to be picking up the mantle temporarily? Who knows? Now, playing the villain is Christian Bale, who is playing Gore the God Butcher. Now, a general understanding that I have of this character is that his family died, he blamed the gods for it, or rather he blames that the gods aren't really the gods because they let his wife die, and so now he goes off killing gods to prove that there are no gods, something like that. So you can assume that something happens to him, he blames the gods for it, most likely he's gonna go after Thor, maybe he fights Thor, but then a new Thor has to rise up. Now what's interesting is that you have Russell Crowe listed as playing Zeus, which is the first time that we're bringing Greek mythology into the MCU. Maybe we're gonna lead up to Hercules being involved in the MCU. Now speaking of Guardians of the Galaxy, talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is going to be taking place after Thor Love and Thunder. Thor is going to be part of the cast, and you know that the Guardians right now are still searching for the 2014 version of Gamora, because their Gamora, the Gamora that we've been seeing throughout the most of the MCU, has died. She was sacrificed by Thanos so that Thanos could gain the Soul Stone. But during the events of Endgame, during the time heist, they went back to 2014 to gain the Power Stone and the Soul Stone. And while they were doing that, the Thanos of that time picked up on what they were doing, obtained the ability to time travel, and then traveled to the present day with his army. Part of that army was a 2014 Gamora. And then after the events of Endgame, when Thanos was defeated, Gamora was still alive because she fought on the side of the heroes. So we're not sure where she is, but at the end of Endgame, we do see that Peter Quill is doing a scan to try and find her. So we know that that's going to be an element going into this movie of where is Gamora, but also realizing that the personal relationship that you once had with Gamora, talking about Peter Quill, is not there. So it'll be an interesting dynamic that when those two characters meet, you have Peter Quill, which is going to have feelings toward Gamora, but Gamora is not going to have the same feelings toward him. Now, one of the other elements to think about when thinking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is the creation of Adam Warlock. So will we see Adam Warlock finally being introduced into this movie? Are we going to see him act as the villain? Is he going to be joining the Guardians of the Galaxy? Who is to say, but I do think that Adam Warlock is going to be a heavily featured character in Volume 3. This is a character I've been very excited for, so I really hope that they do it. Now, we've been talking a lot about Thor, so we have to talk about Loki. Now, Loki is coming out on June 9th. It is the next thing coming out for Phase 4. Now, Loki is not the same Loki that we've been seeing throughout the entirety of the MCU. It is the Loki that we see during the time heist escape with the Tesseract. And by doing that, he becomes a time variant, which means that he falls into custody of the Time Variant Authority, the TVA. And what we learn is that as a result of Loki's escape, it sort of created this shockwave across all of time, forwards and backwards, where because Loki, who was supposed to have been captured, actually wasn't captured, now time is getting messed up and there's other variants getting created. So now Loki has to go back and he has to fix all of these variations. Now, in the trailer, we see him doing things such as he is DB Cooper, which if you don't know who DB Cooper is, he is a mysterious individual who robbed a plane, then jumped out of a plane never to be seen again. But in the series, we see that Loki is actually DB Cooper, but who knows? He is actually DB Cooper, has always been DB Cooper, or that DB Cooper is supposed to happen, but because of this shockwave of events, it doesn't happen, so now Loki has to fulfill that role. I think it's going to be a very interesting series watching Loki bouncing back and forth between all of time, either causing mischief because he is the god of mischief, or actually trying to do his best to fix everything that he messed up. Even though he wasn't really directly responsible for these things, but really he kind of caused it because he didn't get captured like he was supposed to. Now, in the trailer, Loki makes reference to the Timekeepers, and the Timekeepers are what created the Time Variant Authority. They were created by the one who remains. It gets a little crazy and it gets a little beyond me. But what's interesting is that I was watching a breakdown of the trailer and someone pointed out that the likeness of the Timekeepers, who we see in statues within the trailer, look very similar to that of Kang the Conqueror. And we know that Kang the Conqueror is going to get introduced in the third Ant-Man movie. So are we saying that Kang is actually a timekeeper? And is Loki going to act as sort of an introduction to Kang before we see him in Ant-Man 3? Which is sort of a rewriting of the character of Kang, because Kang was a human, then he did a lot of time traveling, he conquered Earth, then Earth was dying, so then he went back in time to conquer a more lively Earth. I mean, it's not the first time that Marvel has rewritten the origins of a character, but let's talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So again, Kang is set to appear in this movie. Kang is also a very big villain in the hierarchy of the Marvel universe. He has at times been an Avengers level threat, so I think this is also a way that we can have an Avengers villain before we get to the big stuff with Galactus. Now, if we think back on what we were assuming with Loki, in that Kang is actually one of the Timekeepers and the leaders of the Time Variant Authority, then he would have a problem with time variation. And if you think about it, Ant-Man using the quantum realm to travel back in time and undo the blip that Thanos did, does that not create a time variant? So possibly that pisses off Kang. Or Kang is coming in, he's using the quantum realm to time travel, he's trying to conquer Earth, and that's creating a mania within the quantum realm. There's a lot of possibilities with Kang. It's either Kang is a timekeeper and he's trying to enforce the time variant authority on Ant-Man because of what happened in Endgame, or if we're going to go more in line with his typical origin, Kang is not a timekeeper, he's not associated with the time variant authority, and he's time traveling through the quantum realm, and the first line of defense is Ant-Man and the Wasp. But let's move on to the Eternals, which is, I think, the movie I am most excited for at this time. First of all, you got this crazy good cast with Richard Madden, Angelina Jolie, Ma Dong-seok, God, I hope I'm saying that right, I probably didn't, Ma Dong-seok, Kit Harington, and also being directed by Chloe Zhao, who was the director for Nomadland, which, by the way, won Best Director and Best Picture at the Oscars. So there's a lot of hype going into this movie, and also if you look at the rumors, apparently Marvel Studios is beside themselves with happiness over how this movie is turning out. They are thinking it's going to be the greatest Marvel movie ever made, which really hypes things up, and I think it's important to temper your expectations a little bit. Let's not get it too high up. I'm not saying go into Eternals expecting it to be bad, I'm just saying don't overblow your expectations. But the Eternals are these immortal beings. They were created by the Celestials, and they have been living on Earth in secret for thousands of years. They've bumped elbows with Greek mythology, possibly even with Norse mythology, possibly with that of Asgard. But one of the interesting things about the Eternals is that there is a condition that some are born with known as deviant syndrome, in that they look very different. And there's a lot of discrimination within the Eternals because of these deviants that look so different. They don't look beautiful like an Eternal is supposed to look. They're very ugly. In fact, Thanos in the comics is a deviant. So it's possible that we could turn around and say, yeah, Thanos is an Eternal that has deviant syndrome, and he was sent off to Titan, and it's possible that the Eternals now feel that they have to come out of hiding and have a more prominent role in the events of the universe now that a deviant collected the Infinity Stones and blipped half of their people away. Because now they're like, well, now we need to combat against the deviant threat. Are there other deviants? Now, according to Kevin Feige, Gemma Chang's character of Cersei is going to be the lead character. Now, if you look at the comics and you look up Cersei, Cersei's one of the characters that actually likes living amongst humans. And so I think it's possible that if the Eternals are living in secret, that Cersei is trying to get them to not be so secretive. Let's help these people. Let's help these humans. We're going to see how this movie is going to shape up. But if you look at the synopsis, they do mention deviants. So I'm wondering if they're going to be leaning more in that direction, more so into the origins of Thanos. Who knows? But I'm so excited for this movie with all the rumors and all the speculation and everything that has been surrounding this movie. Before all of that, I would have looked at the Eternals and been like, I would probably have been more excited for Shang-Chi. But with the rumors, I'm like, oh, okay, you have my attention. But speaking of Shang-Chi, let's talk about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Now, this is going to be the second movie in Phase 4, but it is also going to be reintroducing the Mandarin, the real Mandarin. It is not Sir Ben Kingsley, who was playing an actor known as Trevor in Iron Man 3 that was not actually the Mandarin. And what we see in this trailer is that the Mandarin has always been a figure, even in old times, all the way up to present day. It is a character that has lived very, very long, which is probably the result of one of the rings, which, by the way, the 10 rings refers to 10 magical rings that the Mandarin has, which is based off of alien technology. In the comics, they're all rings on your fingers, but in the trailer, it seems to be more of like bracelets, and they all have a different power. So it's possible that one of them gives long life. Now, the Mandarin is also the leader of an organization known as the Ten Rings, which has existed in the MCU since the very beginning. They are the group that captured Tony Stark in the first Iron Man. They also make a short appearance, a little Easter egg appearance within Ant-Man. They have always been in the background. They have always been present, and now they're at the forefront with this movie. Now, in this movie, we learn that Shang-Chi is actually the son of the Mandarin. He has been trained to be this master of Kung Fu so that even the most dangerous people on Earth cannot kill him. But the Mandarin also gave him 10 years to live his own life, and now that those 10 years are up, he wants Shang-Chi to take his place at his side. And so that's what I think this movie is. I think Shang-Chi is learning that his father is actually a pretty evil dude, and that means he comes at odds with his own father. Now, I think the Mandarin is a really cool character. I think that that's a character that we can go forward with in the future, that we don't have to have him be in a one-off. Like, let's not kill him off. Let's have him be a reoccurring recurring character, possibly even an Avengers level threat. I don't know if they would go that far with him, but I still think that the Mandarin is such a cool character. Let's keep him in the MCU. Let's not kill him off. I'm very excited for this movie because I love Asian culture, and I think that right now celebrating Asian culture is incredibly important. So I'm happy that this movie is coming out when it's coming out. Speaking about celebrating culture, let's talk about Wakanda Forever. The elephant in the room is, unfortunately, do not have Chadwick Boseman among us anymore, which means that he will not be reprising his role as T'Challa in this movie. And so one of the questions going into this movie is, how is Black Panther 2 going to be handling the fact that your star is no longer with us? In an interview, Lupita Nyong'o, the character who played Nakia, she has been saying that this is more of a love letter to Chadwick Boseman. It is more celebrating his life and his legacy. And if you look at the title Wakanda Forever, it makes me think that maybe it's not going to be about a single character, that maybe we don't crown a new Black Panther. I mean, we could say Shuri's the new Black Panther, M'Baku's the next Black Panther, Nakia is the next Black Panther. But also at the same time, I think that maybe we don't crown a new Black Panther. Maybe the role of Black Panther transcends and it's more about the Wakandans coming together to celebrate this one man, that maybe that there is a threat in the movie that they all have to unite, fill the void that T'Challa left behind. Of course, they could just turn around and be like, yeah, we are going to crown a new Black Panther by the end of the movie so that that character can continue within the Avengers. But I still think that this movie is going to be transcending any one person. I think if there is a star, it's probably going to be Lupita Nyong'o. As far as the villain, it's possible that we could be introducing Namor, because if you look at Endgame, Okoye was referring to an earthquake that was in the ocean, and a lot of people were like, Namor. So maybe Namor is the villain of this next movie, but also it might not be. Maybe it could be something completely different. Who knows? There's a lot of unknowns going into this movie. I am very excited to see what the first trailer is, to give us an idea of the direction that they're going to go with, because they are kind of between a rock and a hard place because their star passed away. I love Black Panther. I love the first one, and I want to see the second one. I think Chadwick Boseman is one of the greatest actors of our time. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he will be remembered through his excellent body of work, and I think that this movie is going to be a love letter to him. So for that reason, I am also very excited for it. Now let's go into Moon Knight, who is going to be played by Oscar Isaac. Now, Moon Knight is an interesting character. He is a character that shares a lot of similarities to that of Batman. He is a rich individual. He goes out, he fights crime. He has a lot of gadgets, stuff like that. Now, Moon Knight also has some sort of supernatural element. He is connected to the Egyptian moon god Khonshu. There's a lot of things that I hope I'm saying right in this video. Now, Moon Knight does have a degree of superpowers. He has super strength when it's a full moon. He has premonitions. He can drain life from people. He has also come into contact with supernatural beings like Dracula. And you see that like in this amazing panel where he's trying to find Dracula because Dracula owes him money, which also leans into this idea of, I think Moon Knight is a very jokey character where he's like Deadpool without the fourth wall breaking. I mean, he's not Deadpool. Deadpool is Deadpool. He's a very entertaining character. And so I think that it'll be very interesting to see how this show is going to play out and how entertaining it could possibly be if they do lean into that more jokey side of the character. But I think that if we're going to be bringing in these supernatural elements like Dracula, I think that this is more in line with the direction that the MCU might be going in, because we also have confirmed that we are going to be getting Blade starring Mahershala Ali. So we're going to be seeing a brand new side of the MCU with Dracula, with vampires, maybe even hellish beings like Mephisto. I mean, we already got witches in WandaVision. Doctor Strange is a sorcerer, so we're already getting these supernatural elements. But it makes you wonder that if you got witches, vampires, sorcerers, crime fighters that get their powers from the moon, could we possibly see Ghost Rider at some point? And that's pretty much everything. There are a few things that I did not bring up, namely the Groot series, which I think is just going to be a little fun thing that they decide to do, the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, which will take place in between Thor 4 and Guardians 3. But again, I don't think that it's going to have any big impact on the MCU. I just think that it's going to be a fun thing that they decide to do. And also there is What If, which again, just a fun thing that they're doing. I don't think it's going to have big impact on the MCU overall, but I am excited for that because it is the last time that we're going to get Chadwick Boseman performing as T'Challa. And also, if you look at some of the rumors that are coming out for that series, what they could possibly go over, that I'm excited for, but I didn't think it was that important to go over at this present time. And there are some great things that we could be looking forward to in the future. The introduction of the X-Men, building toward the next big thing, whatever the next Thanos is going to be, possibly Galactus. Now, here is the current release schedule for Marvel. Keep in mind that if you look down at when this video was posted, this video could be out of date. So these things could switch around. Some things could change. We might get new announcements, but I'd be really interested to hear what your thoughts are. As each thing comes out, I think this would be fun to come back regularly to and be like, was Rick right about speculating on this thing that we now have seen? Or was he drastically wrong? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, consider subscribing to the channel, hit the bell icon so you can be notified of all new video uploads. Consider sharing the video with your friends. Get it out there. That would help me out a lot. I would really appreciate it. Check out some of these other videos over here to the side. Thank you all so very much for watching for this lengthy video. I love you all, and I will see you next time.